For thousands of years, the name Homer has stood as one of the greatest mysteries in human history. The poet who shaped the Iliad and the Odyssey, two of the most influential works ever written, remains almost completely unknown. Was he a real man or a myth created by time? No one knows when or where Homer was born. Ancient Greeks themselves argued about it. Some said he came from the island of Chios, others claimed Smyrna or even Ios. But beyond the legends, no historical record proves that he truly existed. What we do know is that the Iliad and Odyssey were born in an age before writing. Stories were passed from mouth to mouth, generation to generation. Each poet added something new, changing the tale little by little. So was Homer the original author, or the final storyteller who gave these epics their immortal form? Some believe Homer was not one person, but a group of poets who preserved the memory of the Trojan War. Others think he was a single genius who gathered the oral songs of his people into one masterpiece. Over time, Homer became a symbol, the father of Western literature, the first great voice of storytelling. His name might be uncertain, but his legacy shaped every poet, philosopher, and writer who came after him. Whether man or myth, Homer became something greater, the voice of ancient Greece itself.
Long before books and libraries, ancient Greece was a world of spoken stories. Around 3,000 years ago, poets and travelers carried tales from city to city, singing of gods, heroes, and battles beneath the stars. This was the birthplace of epic poetry, where memory was stronger than ink, and words were meant to live in the air. In this world, the poet was not just an entertainer, he was a historian, a teacher, and a keeper of truth. His voice preserved the glory of heroes and the warnings of fate. Each performance was different, shaped by the moment, by the audience, by the emotion of the singer himself. From these oral traditions, two great rivers of poetry would rise, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They were not just stories, they were living memories of an age of war and wonder. Through rhythm and repetition, these poems survived for centuries before being written down. They carried the language, beliefs, and dreams of an entire civilization. Epic poetry was more than art. It was identity. It taught courage, honor, and the meaning of being human. And from its heart came the voice that would echo across all time, Homer's.
Before the written word, stories lived in voices. In the ancient world, memory was the library, and the poet was its guardian. Tales of war, gods, and destiny were not read, they were sung. Each line carried rhythm and melody, designed to be remembered and passed on. This was the oral tradition, the living heartbeat of ancient culture. Poets, known as rhapsodies, traveled from place to place, performing verses in public squares, festivals, and royal courts. They didn't read from scrolls, they spoke from memory, shaping their words to fit the moment, the crowd, and the emotion. Through repetition and formula, they kept enormous poems alive for generations. Patterns, phrases, and epithets like swift-footed Achilles or rosy-fingered Dawn were not just poetic, they were tools for survival, helping the poet remember hundreds of lines with precision. Each performance was a recreation, not a copy. The story evolved slightly each time, molded by the voice of the performer. And somewhere in this chain of storytellers, one name rose above all others: Homer. It was through this oral tradition that his words endured. Before ink touched parchment, before history began to write itself, Homer's world already lived, carried by the human voice. Who was Homer? No one truly knows. His life is hidden behind the mist of legend, where myth and memory blend together. The ancient Greeks themselves could not agree. 7 cities claimed to be his birthplace: Smyrna, Chios, Colophon, Ithaca, Pylos, Argos, and even Ios, each one proudly declaring that the greatest poet of all time had walked their land. Some ancient accounts say he lived around the 8th century BCE, a time when Greece was emerging from its dark ages, when oral poetry was the bridge between myth and history. Others place him even earlier, suggesting he lived closer to the time of the Trojan War itself. According to legend, Homer was born poor, and he spent his life wandering from town to town, singing stories of heroes and gods in exchange for food and shelter. Some say he was once a school teacher before losing his sight, which gave rise to the image of the blind poet who could see the truth of the world through words alone. Ancient writers like Herodotus, the father of history, tried to trace his life, but found only contradictions. The Homeric hymns, poems dedicated to the gods, were once thought to be his youthful works, though their true authors remain unknown. One tale tells that Homer died on the island of Ios, heartbroken after failing to solve a riddle posed by local children. Another says he vanished at sea, his voice carried away by the wind, like the verses he left behind. Whether born of fact or fable, Homer's story reflects the very spirit of ancient Greece, a civilization that loved its heroes so much it turned even its poets into legends. For centuries, Homer has been described as the blind poet. But was he truly blind, or is blindness only a symbol of something greater? In the ancient world, blindness was often seen as a sign of inner vision. The idea that those who could not see the world with their eyes could perceive deeper truths with their mind. Many believed that Homer's blindness gave him the power to see beyond the physical world, to witness the realm of gods and heroes with his imagination. Some ancient writers claimed that Homer lost his sight later in life, perhaps through illness or age. Others argued he was born blind, but there is no evidence, only tradition. What's more likely is that the blind poet became a powerful image, a poetic symbol that people used to explain the mystery of his genius. Blindness in Greek culture was often linked to wisdom and prophecy. The prophet Tiresias, for example, was blind but could see the future. In this sense, calling Homer blind might have meant that he possessed a kind of divine insight, the gift to reveal truths hidden from ordinary men. Ironically, the poems themselves are filled with vivid visual detail: the glitter of bronze armor, the glow of sunrise, the vast blue sea. Whoever composed them saw the world clearly, whether through eyes or through imagination. Perhaps Homer's blindness is not about sight at all. Perhaps it means that he did not need to see, because he could make others see. His vision was not of the eyes, but of the soul. The Iliad stands as one of humanity's greatest creations, a poem of war, wrath, and destiny. But how was it born? Long before it was written down, the Iliad lived in the voices of countless poets who told of the Trojan War. They sang of heroes, gods, and battles that had already become half history, half myth. Out of this vast sea of stories, one poet, perhaps Homer himself, gave the legend its perfect form.
The Iliad is not the story of the whole Trojan War. It tells only a brief moment, a few weeks in the final year of the conflict. Yet in those weeks, it captures everything about the human condition: anger, pride, love, and loss. At its heart is Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greeks, and his rage, his wrath against Agamemnon, his sorrow for Patroclus, and his ultimate compassion for the enemy, Hector. Through Achilles, Homer shows that even the mightiest hero cannot escape pain, fate, or death. The poem's power lies not in victory, but in understanding. It reminds us that glory fades, but humanity endures. The walls of Troy fall, yet the voices of its people still echo through time. Scholars believe the Iliad took shape around the 8th century BCE, when oral tradition reached its peak. Over generations, the verses were refined, repeated, and finally written down, preserving the heartbeat of a civilization that worshipped both courage and tragedy. The Iliad is more than an epic of war. It is a mirror of the human soul, born from the chaos of battle, yet filled with beauty, wisdom, and sorrow. And through it, Homer created something immortal, a story that made men gods, and gods human.
At the heart of the Iliad burns one emotion: rage. The rage of Achilles. It begins the poem, drives the story, and defines one of the greatest heroes ever imagined. Achilles was born to be the perfect warrior. Swift, strong, and nearly invincible, he was the pride of the Greek army. But his greatness was matched only by his pride, and that pride became his downfall. When Agamemnon, the Greek king, insulted him and took away his prize of honor, Achilles refused to fight. His anger was not just personal, it was cosmic. In a world ruled by honor, to be disrespected was to lose everything. So Achilles withdrew, and the war began to collapse without him. But as his people died on the battlefield, his wrath grew darker. It was no longer about honor, but revenge. When his closest friend, Patroclus, was killed by Hector, Prince of Troy, Achilles' fury consumed him completely. He returned to battle, unstoppable, merciless, a man transformed into a storm of death. Yet even in his greatest victory, he found no peace. Standing over the body of Hector, the man he hated most, Achilles faced the emptiness within himself. His anger had destroyed everything, even his humanity. The Iliad is not a simple tale of heroism. It is a tragedy about emotion without control, about how even the strongest can be ruled by what burns inside them. Achilles shows us that true strength is not in power, but in understanding one's own heart. In the end, his rage fades only when he meets the grieving father of Hector, King Priam, who begs for his son's body. In that quiet moment, he sees himself, a man bound by sorrow. For the first time, he chooses compassion over fury. Through Achilles, Homer gave the world a timeless truth. The greatest battle is not fought on the field, but within the soul.
For thousands of years, people have wondered, did the Trojan War really happen, or was it only a legend? The Iliad tells of mighty heroes, jealous gods, and a city brought to ruin. But behind the poetry, could there be truth? According to Homer, Troy was a grand city surrounded by towering walls, ruled by King Priam. The Greeks, led by Agamemnon, sailed across the sea to reclaim Helen, the queen whose beauty launched 1,000 ships. For 10 long years, they fought beneath Troy's walls until the city finally fell to deception, the famous wooden horse that hid Greek warriors within. For centuries, scholars believed it was all myth, a story to teach lessons about honor, pride, and fate. But in the 19th century, a man named Heinrich Schliemann began to dig in modern-day Turkey near the ancient city of Hisarlik. There, he uncovered the remains of a great city that had been destroyed by fire around 1200 BCE, the very time the Trojan War was said to occur. Archaeologists later confirmed that this site showed signs of battle and rebuilding, evidence that Troy may have been real, not just imagined. Yet the details of Homer's tale, Achilles, Helen, the gods themselves, remain poetic symbols rather than historical facts. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe there was a real conflict, a war between kingdoms over power and trade, and over time, memory transformed it into legend. Heroes became larger than life, and mortals became myths. The fall of Troy may never be proven beyond doubt, but its story endures because it speaks to something deeper: the fragility of glory, the cost of pride, and the eternal struggle between love and destruction. Whether truth or fiction, Troy stands as a mirror to humanity, showing that every civilization, no matter how proud, can fall.
When the fires of Troy finally died, one man began a journey that would define the meaning of endurance. His name was Odysseus, king of Ithaca, warrior of Troy, and the hero of Homer's Odyssey. The Odyssey is not a tale of war, but of return. It begins after the glory has faded, when the world's greatest hero must face the long road home. For 10 years, Odysseus wanders the seas, facing monsters, storms, and gods who test his strength and his heart. He faces the Cyclops, the one-eyed giant, the Sirens, whose voices promise death, and the goddess Circe, who turns men into beasts. Each encounter is more than a test of courage. It is a reflection of human temptation, pride, and wisdom. But the greatest challenge is not the journey itself. It is time. As the years pass, Odysseus becomes a symbol of perseverance, a man fighting not just against fate, but against forgetting who he is. Back in Ithaca, his wife Penelope waits, surrounded by suitors who consume his wealth and mock his memory. Yet she never loses faith. Her patience mirrors his endurance. Two souls separated by distance, but united by love and will. The Odyssey is more than an adventure story. It is a meditation on homecoming, on identity, and on the eternal struggle between man and destiny. Odysseus is not the strongest or the most divine hero. He is the most human. He wins not through power, but through intelligence, resilience, and cunning. When he finally returns home, disguised as a beggar, and reclaims his kingdom, it is not victory that defines him. It is recognition. He has seen the world, faced every trial, and found his way back to himself. Through Odysseus, Homer showed that the greatest journey is not across the sea, but within the soul. The endless voyage to find one's way home.
The journey of Odysseus was not just a voyage across the sea. It was a journey through the imagination of the ancient world. Every island, every creature, every god he faced represented more than danger. They were symbols of the temptations that test the human spirit.
Among the most haunting of these are the Sirens, beautiful voices that call sailors to their deaths, promising knowledge and pleasure beyond human reach. To hear them was to lose yourself forever. But Odysseus, curious and brave, wished to listen without dying. He ordered his men to fill their ears with wax and tie him to the mast of his ship. Bound by rope, he heard their song, the song of desire and forbidden truth, and survived. The Sirens remind us that knowledge and temptation are often the same thing. Then came the monsters, Scylla and Charybdis. One a creature with 6 heads that devoured sailors, the other a whirlpool that swallowed ships whole. Between them, Odysseus had to steer, losing some men to save the rest. It was a cruel choice, a test of leadership and sacrifice. He met gods and goddesses who offered comfort and danger alike. Circe, who turned men into animals, invited him to forget his journey and stay in her paradise. Calypso, the immortal nymph, kept him captive for 7 years, offering him eternal youth and love if he would abandon his home. Yet, even with all the world's pleasures before him, Odysseus longed only for Ithaca, for his wife, his son, and his place in the world. Every trial in the Odyssey mirrors the struggles of the human soul: desire, fear, loss, and hope. The gods toy with men, the monsters threaten them, and the sea itself becomes a symbol of fate, unpredictable, endless, and cruel. But through it all, Odysseus remains constant. His strength is not in battle, but in will. He resists the temptations of immortality, the comfort of illusion, and the power of despair. He chooses the hard path home, proving that humanity's greatest power is endurance.
While Odysseus faced storms, monsters, and the wrath of gods, another kind of hero waited far away, his wife, Penelope. Her story is not one of swords and ships, but of patience, intelligence, and unshakable loyalty. For 20 years, Penelope lived in uncertainty. Her husband was gone, her son grew into manhood, and her home was filled with greedy suitors who demanded that she choose a new husband. They consumed her food, mocked her hope, and treated Odysseus as if he were already dead. But Penelope never surrendered. Each night, she found new ways to keep her faith alive. When pressed to choose a suitor, she promised she would decide once she finished weaving a burial shroud for Odysseus's father. Yet every night, in secret, she unraveled the cloth she had woven during the day. Her trick bought her 3 more years of hope, a quiet rebellion disguised as patience. Penelope's strength was not in violence or defiance, but in endurance. She waited not because she was weak, but because she believed. Her loyalty was not blind devotion, it was wisdom. She understood that true love is not proven by passion, but by time. When Odysseus finally returned disguised as a beggar, it was Penelope who tested him. She did not run to him in blind faith, she used her mind, asking about the secret of their marriage bed, something only her true husband could know. In that moment, Odysseus was revealed, and the two were reunited, equals in intelligence, courage, and faith. Through Penelope, Homer gave the world one of its first great portrayals of a strong woman, not a warrior, not a goddess, but a soul of quiet power. Her patience was her weapon, her love her armor. Penelope reminds us that heroism is not always found on the battlefield. Sometimes it is found in waiting, in believing,
and in never letting go of what is true.
In Homer's world, the gods are everywhere, in the wind, in the sea, in the hearts of men. Yet they are not distant, perfect beings. They are powerful, but flawed, divine, yet deeply human. Through them, Homer revealed how ancient Greece saw the universe, not as ruled by fate alone, but by will, passion, and chaos. The gods of the Iliad and the Odyssey are not symbols of moral perfection. They argue, deceive, fall in love, and seek revenge. Zeus, the father of gods, struggles to keep order. Hera, his wife, plots against him. Athena aids the clever, Poseidon punishes the proud, and Aphrodite defends desire at any cost. The divine realm mirrors the human one, a reflection of its beauty and its weakness. In the Iliad, the gods take sides in the Trojan War, fighting through men. The battlefield becomes their stage. When Achilles rages, when Hector falls, when Troy burns, the gods are watching, pushing, interfering. Yet even they cannot escape fate. Destiny in Homer's world stands above both gods and men. In the Odyssey, the gods serve as teachers of endurance and humility. Athena guides Odysseus with wisdom, while Poseidon punishes him for pride. Each divine act reveals a truth about humanity, that suffering, struggle, and perseverance are not punishments, but paths to understanding. Homer's gods are not just forces of nature, they are mirrors of human emotion. They love, they hate, they make mistakes, and through their flaws, Homer shows that the divine and the mortal are forever intertwined. To the ancient Greeks, this was not blasphemy, it was truth. The gods were part of life, as unpredictable as the sea and as passionate as the heart. Homer's vision of the divine is not about worship, but about awareness. He reminds us that power, whether human or divine, always comes with imperfections, and that wisdom begins when we see the gods within ourselves.
In Homer's world, life is ruled by two forces, honor and fate. To the ancient Greeks, these were not just ideas, they were the laws that shaped existence itself. Every hero in the Iliad and the Odyssey lives and dies by them. Honor, or kleos, was the measure of a man's worth. It was earned through courage, loyalty, and great deeds. A warrior fought not only for victory, but for remembrance, to have his name live on after death. To die without honor was the greatest tragedy. To be forgotten was worse than dying itself. But alongside honor stood fate, Moira, the mysterious force that no one, not even the gods, could escape. Fate determined how long a man would live, how he would die, and what legacy he would leave behind. In Homer's stories, heroes do not fight fate, they meet it with dignity. Achilles knew that if he fought at Troy, he would die young, but be remembered forever. If he stayed home, he would live a long life, but his name would vanish. He chose glory, the path of eternal memory. In that choice lies the essence of the Greek moral code, to embrace destiny, even when it leads to suffering, because meaning is found in how one faces it. Honor was the pursuit of greatness. Fate was the boundary of life. Together they formed a balance. The mortals struggled between ambition and acceptance. Homer did not preach morality in the way later religions would. Instead, he showed it through action, through how his heroes confronted fear, death, and consequence. In the end, the true greatness of a hero was not measured by victory, but by how he met his fate. To live with courage, to act with honor, and to accept one's destiny. This was the highest virtue in Homer's Greece. Through his poetry, Homer taught that even in a world ruled by fate, human choice still mattered. It is not how long we live, but how bravely we live that defines us.
For centuries after his time, Homer was not just a poet, he was a teacher. In ancient Greece, his works were the foundation of education, shaping how generations learned to think, speak, and understand the world. The Iliad and the Odyssey were more than stories. They were textbooks of morals, language, and philosophy. Every Greek child, from humble homes to noble families, grew up hearing his verses. To learn Greek was to learn Homer. His words were the first lessons in heroism, justice, and human nature. Teachers used his poems to teach reading, writing, and memory. Students memorized long passages, recited them aloud, and analyzed the choices of heroes and gods. Through Homer, they learned what it meant to be brave, wise, and honorable. But Homer's influence went beyond education. It shaped identity. The Greeks saw themselves through his eyes. His heroes defined their ideals. His gods reflected their fears and hopes. To understand Homer was to understand what it meant to be Greek. Even philosophers like Plato and Aristotle studied his works. Plato criticized Homer for portraying the gods as flawed, yet he admitted that no other poet had captured the truth of the human soul so deeply. Aristotle admired the structure of Homer's storytelling, calling him the master of epic poetry, the one who set the standard for all literature that followed. For hundreds of years, the epics were performed, recited, and studied across the Greek world. They were not just entertainment, they were education, culture, and faith woven into verse. Through Homer, the Greeks learned more than words. They learned how to think, how to question, and how to find meaning in a world ruled by fate. Even today, when we read Homer, we are still his students, discovering, as the ancients once did, that poetry can teach us what it means to be human.
Homer is known for two masterpieces, the Iliad and the Odyssey. But ancient writers spoke of many more works that once carried his name. Over time, these other epics vanished, leaving only fragments, titles, and whispers of their stories. Among them were the Cypria, the Aethiopis, the Little Iliad, the Sack of Troy, and the Returns. Together, they formed what was called the Epic Cycle, a grand collection of poems that told the entire saga of the Trojan War, from its beginning to its aftermath. The Cypria described the events that led to the war, the judgment of Paris, the abduction of Helen, and the gathering of the Greek armies. The Aethiopis continued the Iliad, telling of the Amazon warrior Penthesilea and the Ethiopian king Memnon, both of whom fought and died at Troy. The Little Iliad and the Sack of Troy told of the city's final destruction, the Trojan horse, and the fall of Priam. And the Returns followed the Greek heroes as they tried to find their way home, stories that set the stage for the Odyssey. There were also the Homeric hymns, poems dedicated to the gods, written in the same epic style. They praised Zeus, Apollo, Hermes, Demeter, and others, capturing the beauty of devotion and myth. Whether Homer himself wrote them or his followers did, they show how deeply his influence shaped the Greek imagination. Unfortunately, most of these works were lost over time. Wars, fires, and neglect erased them from history. What remains are only quotations and summaries written by later scholars. And yet, even in their absence, their spirit survives,
Through the Iliad and Odyssey, we still sense the vastness of that lost world, a tapestry of stories that once surrounded Homer's name. The lost epics remind us that greatness is not always preserved in full. Sometimes what vanishes still echoes, and the silence left behind becomes part of the legend itself.
Homer was more than a poet. He was a teacher of thought, a guide to understanding human nature. His epics shaped not only literature, but the very philosophy of ancient Greece. Thinkers like Plato and Aristotle grew up with Homer's words. Plato criticized him for portraying the gods as flawed, sometimes cruel, and morally ambiguous. Yet even he acknowledged that Homer's stories taught lessons about human behavior, virtue, and the consequences of pride. The epics were mirrors of the human soul, showing both its greatness and its weakness. Aristotle praised Homer for his mastery of storytelling. He argued that epic poetry could teach ethics, provoke emotion, and shape character. By observing heroes and their choices, students learned about courage, justice, and wisdom, lessons that applied to real life, not just the battlefield. Beyond ethics, Homer influenced the way philosophers thought about fate, reason, and the gods. His depiction of divine forces interacting with human decisions sparked debates about free will and destiny. Were humans truly in control, or merely actors in a divine play? Homer's epics provided the first canvas on which these questions could be explored. Even the Stoics, centuries later, drew from Homer. They saw his heroes confronting suffering and fate with dignity, teaching the value of endurance and moral strength. In every age, philosophers returned to Homer, finding guidance in his stories of honor, courage, and the complexity of life. Through his poetry, Homer did more than entertain. He shaped the mind of a civilization. His influence on Greek philosophy reminds us that storytelling and thought are inseparable, and that wisdom often comes wrapped in the words of a tale.
After centuries in the shadows of the medieval world, Homer was rediscovered during the Renaissance, a time when Europe awakens to the art, knowledge, and culture of ancient Greece and Rome. Scholars, artists, and poets turned once again to his epics, finding inspiration in their grandeur and timeless wisdom. Manuscripts of the Iliad and the Odyssey, preserved in monasteries and libraries, were studied, copied, and translated. Humanists like Petrarch and Boccaccio marveled at the brilliance of Homer's imagination, praising his heroes, gods, and epic storytelling. They saw in his works a guide to understanding human nature, honor, and the eternal struggles of life. Artists depicted scenes from Troy and Odysseus's voyage, turning Homer's words into paintings, sculptures, and stage performances. The Renaissance celebrated the human form and human emotion, and Homer's epics were perfect models, heroes who were strong, flawed, and profoundly human. Poets like Dante and Shakespeare drew on Homeric themes. The Iliad and the Odyssey became sources of structure, narrative, and moral reflection. Epic battles, journeys of self-discovery, and struggles against fate echoed through European literature centuries after the original tales were written. The Renaissance rediscovery of Homer was more than nostalgia for antiquity. It was a revival of curiosity, reason, and artistry. Through his epics, scholars and artists found a connection to a civilization that had shaped the foundations of thought, storytelling, and imagination. Homer, once a distant voice from a forgotten past, became a guiding star for the modern world, proof that great stories and the truths they carry never truly fade.
Homer's influence did not end in the Renaissance. His stories of heroes, gods, and epic journeys continue to shape modern literature, film, and popular culture. The Iliad and the Odyssey are more than ancient texts. They are blueprints for storytelling across the world. Writers from James Joyce to Margaret Atwood have drawn inspiration from Homer's epics. Joyce's Ulysses mirrors Odysseus's journey in a modern city, turning a single day into an epic of thought, memory, and experience. Countless novels retell the Trojan War, explore the lives of its heroes, or imagine what it meant to live in Homer's world. In cinema, Homer's influence is unmistakable. Epic films like Troy, O Brother, Where Art Thou?, and even animated adaptations draw directly from his stories. Odysseus's journey, Achilles' rage, and the fall of Troy continue to captivate audiences, proving that the themes Homer explored, courage, loyalty, fate, and human desire, are eternal. Even video games, comic books, and television series borrow from Homeric archetypes. Heroes, villains, epic quests, and moral dilemmas trace their roots back to his imagination. Homer's characters are templates for storytelling, demonstrating the power of narrative to endure across time and media. Homer in the modern era shows us that stories are not static. They evolve, adapt, and inspire, yet they retain their core truth. Courage, sacrifice, love, and the struggle against fate are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Through literature and cinema, Homer remains alive, a voice from the distant past that continues to shape how we tell our stories, understand heroism, and explore the human heart.
For centuries, the city of Troy existed only in story, a place of myth where gods intervened and heroes clashed. But in the 19th century, the search for the real Troy began, bridging legend and archaeology. A German businessman and amateur archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann became obsessed with Homer's texts. Using descriptions from the Iliad and Odyssey, he excavated a mound in modern-day Turkey called Hisarlik. There, he discovered the remains of a great city, layered with walls, palaces, and signs of destruction by fire, evidence that suggested a war had really taken place. Later excavations by other archaeologists confirmed multiple layers of settlement, showing that Troy had been built, destroyed, and rebuilt over centuries. While Homer's heroes, gods, and events remain poetic, the city itself may have been real, a center of trade, power, and conflict in the late Bronze Age. Historians now believe that Homer's stories were inspired by actual events, wars, sieges, and political struggles passed down through generations before becoming immortal epics. Troy became more than myth. It was history filtered through imagination, memory, and storytelling. The search for Troy reminds us of the power of stories. What begins as legend can lead to discovery, and what was once thought impossible can become reality. Homer's tales preserve not only the heroism of men, but the memory of a city that may have truly stood, bridging the world of myth and the world of fact. Through archaeology and scholarship, Troy lives again, not just as a tale of the past, but as a testament to the enduring legacy of Homer's imagination.
Homer's voice has echoed across millennia, shaping not only literature, but culture, philosophy, and the very way humans understand heroism and the human condition. His epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, are more than stories. They're blueprints of human experience, exploring love, courage, loss, and destiny. Through his heroes, Homer taught the meaning of honor and the consequences of pride.
Through his gods, he explored power, jealousy, and the limits of control. Through his journeys, he showed the importance of perseverance, intelligence, and moral choice. Homer's influence did not end with the Greeks. Roman poets adapted his tales, medieval scholars preserved them, Renaissance artists celebrated them, and modern writers, filmmakers, and thinkers continue to draw inspiration from them. His epics are alive in classrooms, novels, films, and even video games, proving that his stories transcend time and culture. The power of Homer lies in his ability to capture what is eternal in the human soul. He reminds us that heroism is not only about strength, but also about wisdom and compassion. That adventure is not only about travel, but about the journey within. And that the human experience, with all its triumphs, failures, and struggles, is worth telling again and again. Homer is more than a poet. He is a teacher, a philosopher, and a witness to the timeless truths of life. His words endure because they speak to everyone, across generations, across continents, and across time itself. The legacy of Homer is eternal because as long as humans tell stories, seek meaning, and explore the depths of courage, love, and fate, his voice will continue to be heard.
Homer's words have survived for thousands of years because they capture universal truths about courage, honor, fate, and the human spirit. His epics are full of lines that still resonate today. Even his griefs are a joy long after, to one that remembers all that he wrought and endured, the Odyssey. This reminds us that suffering and struggle, when overcome, become a source of wisdom and strength. Any man who has been through suffering knows the value of endurance, the Odyssey. Homer teaches that patience and resilience are among the greatest virtues a person can possess. The blade itself incites to deeds of violence, the Iliad. A warning that anger, pride, and unchecked aggression bring destruction even to the strongest hero. Be strong, saith my heart. I am a warrior. I have a soul of iron, the Iliad. A call to courage, reminding us that true heroism comes from inner strength and determination. Death is the common lot of all men, but a noble life wins everlasting glory, the Iliad. Homer celebrates honor, showing that even in mortality, one's actions and character can live on. These lines are more than poetry. They are timeless guidance, teaching us about resilience, courage, and wisdom, the very qualities that define humanity. Through his words, Homer continues to speak, reminding us that the lessons of the past endure forever.